G'day from Australia. My name's Ashley Davis. Welcome to my coding live stream. I'm recording these sessions live, but I'm making them available on YouTube later. You're watching me build the Photosphere application from nothing while I try and explain what I'm doing while I'm doing it. Please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at any time. You can see my handle on the screen. Before we get into coding, I'll start with the tradition we have here in Australia. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from which I'm broadcasting. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. I'm doing these live streams to support my book, Rapid Fullstack Development. You can find it online at rapidfullstackdevelopment.com. Please check it out. You'll see the first chapter is available to read free online. We are multiple sessions into the live stream now, and you can find previous sessions of this live stream on the Code Capers channel on YouTube. So choose playlists, find the Rapid Fullstack Development playlist. You can see the full playlist if you click View Full Playlist. And you can see all the previous sessions of this live stream here. Lots of ground that we've covered already. All the code that I'm building during this live stream is going to go on the GitHub page, Rapid Fullstack Development. So please check it out on GitHub. That's Rapid Fullstack Development. In the previous session, we wrote this code, the prototype custom gallery layout. So I was continuing to learn how to develop a photo gallery for the front end of Photosphere. And I came up with a custom layout that was pretty much what I wanted, not quite there because, it was prototype code. I didn't want to invest in too much in it. I was just looking for answers. I was just looking for answers for questions I had. How do I build this kind of thing? How do I code this up? So once I got those questions answered, I dropped this prototype and I was ready to move on to some actual production coding. So I've got a very strong direction now and I know what I'm doing. So I do feel confident that I can engage in test-driven development at this point. So test-driven development, normally you do have to have a very good idea of what you want to achieve and where you're heading with it, because you've just got to know that direction. You've got to have that really, really set. I'm not actually just going to be using test-driven development though. So I will be doing test-driven development, writing my tests first, and then writing the code to make the tests pass. But I'm not just going to be testing my code with these automated tests. I am going to be testing my code visually as well. So I'm going to have the front end set up so that I can see what the gallery looks like, in the front end. And I'm also going to be writing the tests to prove that it works. So if you remember, quite a few sessions ago now, I created this React Parcel template. So that is my starting point today. I'm going to start by copying that, and I'll call it Photo Gallery TDD Livestream. So eventually, this code will go into the production front end for Photosphere. But this is the repo that I'm creating today, and I'm going to probably progress this through multiple sessions, especially seeing as I started a little bit late today. So just copying that template and starting from that. I'll just open Visual Studio Code here to start with, and I'll install my dependencies. Okay, so we've got our dependencies installed. I'm gonna do a first commit now. So this is intended to be like production code. So I am going to commit my code regularly whenever I have working code. So this was already a Git repo. So I'm just going to remove the Git folder, the .git folder there. So I'm going to create like a fresh repo here. And I'll just say, this is the first commit from the template. So I've got a fresh starting point here. I've set up Jest before multiple times, so I kind of know what I'm doing. But because I'm trying to approach everything I'm doing here, from the viewpoint of someone who's approaching this for the first time, I'm gonna start with the Jest Getting Started guide. Just work through that. So I'm thinking it's going to be under the docs here. So this is the Jest Getting Started guide. What do I need to do? Well, I need to install Jest. So I'm installing Jest in my project here. And notice that I'm installing it as a dev dependency. So this is a development only dependency. I don't need Jest in production. It's got some examples here, some example tests and some example code to test. So I'm actually going to get that working. While Jest is installing, I'll get these tests in my project. So it says, first create a sum.js file. So let's do that. Sum.test. I always like to put my tests in a tests subdirectory or test subdirectory, just to keep them differentiated from the code. So we've got something just to test here that Jest is working. I'm just going to add Jest at the following section to your package.json. Add test running Jest. Another thing that I like to use is Jest in watch mode for live reload. And I say watch. And I think it's just the watch flag. Okay, Jest has finished installing, so I'm going to run npm test just to try that. Hopefully I'll have a running test. Okay, we've got some problems here. Oh, because I changed the, I put this under the test directory, it needs to load some module from one level up in the file system. See, that's all this is. Cool, we've got a passing test. So I'm not going to commit these tests, right? These example tests that I've added. It's not really something that's important to me. So I am just going to delete the example tests that I added, and I will commit everything else. So everything else is basically the setup here. Let's do a div. Just checking what I've added here. That looks great. Just doing a little bit of self-review here to make sure. Good. So just do my commit to get this Jest testing set up in. Now, one thing that I have to add here that I'll do it before I start just so I don't forget is I want to be able to use the import keyword and the export keyword. And by default, Jest doesn't seem to allow you to do that. So to enable that, I'm going to set up some table configuration that Jest will use to compile my JavaScript code. I've just got something here that I can copy over. So this is not from the Jest Getting Started guide. I just figured out how to do this just through trial and error. And I've got to install this module that I'm using that allows me to use the import. I've got to basically install this Babel plugin that allows me to do that. And I'm just going to commit that. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to get set up for visual testing. I want to get my photo gallery rendering in my page. You can see here from the template is just color computer. So I'm just going to copy the test gallery data file that I've been using the last few sessions. I'll copy that from a random gallery generator into the source directory here. You can see that I've got my gallery data file here now. Let me zoom in. So you can see here, this is just JSON data that contains all the gallery of random photos that I'm going to be displaying in my photo gallery. We've looked at that in multiple sessions so far, so I invite you to go back and watch some of those earlier sessions. Actually, one thing I can do to make this move a little bit faster is I'm just going to copy some of the code that I wrote last session over to here, get the structure of the app set up. So to do that, I'll go into that prototype. Which one was it? The custom gallery layout. This is the one. I'll bring up VS Code for that. And this is a good way to start. This is a good way to start because I know this code works, even though I do want to cut it back. There's more here than I want to do. Copy it over here. So I've got my dev server running. I'm going to open the web page. Yeah, we see the custom photo gallery layout algorithm code here running that produces this quite nice looking gallery. That's the code that I wrote in the last session. So this is all the code here. This is all the code that I actually just want to rewrite with test-driven development. I do want my rows. I'm basically just going to push every gallery item into the one row for now. Hopefully that's enough to make that work. I'll hard code the height of each row back to 200 pixels. We can do that properly. Current row.push. It's actually, as you can see here, it's items. Variable, let's just code that was stripped out just a moment ago. So very important whenever you're coding is to start from a working base. So if I can't get this working, but no business, coding on top of something that's not working, that's good. So I've stripped out, I've got a gallery here that renders row by row. So I've got the visual part of it sort of done, pretty much the way it was done in the last session. I've stripped out the custom kind of layout that I was doing here in the last session, which I'm going to rebuild using test-driven development. But at the moment, this is like a working baseline. And if I break the code now, Now I want to be able to come back and reset back to working code. So I'm going to commit. So this is sort of my working baseline code. Now committed. I'll restart my dev server. Let's put a nice title on this web page. Now, what I want to do here is I'm going to do a little refactor to pull out a component for the photo gallery. So this is all, at the moment, this is all rendered in the app component, and I'd prefer to have this be in its own component. One quick way I can do that is basically just to save this as a new file. I'm doing a save as here. Call it gallery.js. So I've got gallery.js and app.js. Gallery. And then in app.js, I will import my gallery. That's just a quick refactor. Hopefully that's going to work. Refresh here to make sure it's all good. I should open the DevTools as well, just so I can watch any errors in the DevTools. Those DevTools down the bottom. Out of the way. Good. That works. So I will do. I'm actually going to another terminal here. So have as many terminals open as you need. I'm just going to use this one to actually be able to commit while I'm working. Committing that refactor there. Now, one other thing I need here is I should be passing props into this. Like I should be passing the actual gallery data itself should be props to the gallery. Things like the gallery width, or it should be using a ref. It should be using a ref here to actually get the width of this this element. I'm not going to worry about. I'm just going to shortcut that at the moment because I just want to get on with this. What I want to do here is I want to factor out my layout algorithm, and this is my layout algorithm here, right? This thing here. A refactor rename on this. And call it create layout. And so that creates a new function down the bottom here, create layout. Now I could test this and make sure it still works. I'm pretty sure it will, but I just want to plug this into a separate file that I can test independently. So I'm going to call that layout.js, and I'll take that whole file, I'll move it out there, and I'll export that. Now there's a few things here actually that are missing. So like gallery needs to be passed in. Let's pass that in. I'm not going to worry about passing rows in, so I'm actually going to move that rows. I'll move that in here, and then I'm going to return it. So what this is taking is it's taking in a gallery, and it's returning the rows that it computes. The layout that it creates is. Make a nice comment here, and then I can get my rows back here and pass in my gallery. Now this create layout has not been imported yet, so I can import that up here. Do a refresh on that. All good, no errors. That means my refactor was successful. I'm going to commit. I should be checking all these commits, but I'm trying to move through this a little bit quickly. Normally I'd be doing like a self-review and trying to make sure I hadn't broken anything, but I've tested it, so that's at least one thing that I've done. So I've refactored the layout algorithm to its own file. Let's make some tests. So I'll make a file here called layout.test.js. I'll make a test suite. The first thing I'll do is here, I'll just make sure I can do it. Let's just get a test in to do. Like I'll think of a name for it in a second. Expect it true to be true. So this should be a passing test. So this is about my testing in live reload again. So I'm running jest here. Cool, I've got a passing test, so that can work. I'm going to import the actual code module I'm going to be testing here. I'm going to be testing the create layout function from the layout module. Let's just test that. I can call that here. The array. Hey, this should be easy to test, right? This is our first test really. Is testing that an empty gallery, so we've got an empty array here, test that an empty gallery can return an empty list of rows. Will that do the trick? Obviously, this should fail. Just make a nice name for this test. An empty gallery returns an empty layout. Get rid of this bar so I see the code better. So we've got a failing test. I mean, this is the thing about TDD, is that you always start with a failing test. I haven't written any code yet. In fact, let's pull the code out. Actually, I have written the code. So this is the code that I factored out, right? So it's returning. It's doing the wrong thing there. But let's just get rid of that. Let's get rid of the code that was there. So I'm just going to comment out that code that sort of stuffed in there to get this work. So this is literally starting with nothing. So what it's saying here is that it's expecting an empty array, and then it's getting nothing back. And that's fine because we're not returning anything from create layout here. It's the same as if I explicitly returned undefined here. So that's the same thing, right? I could make this test pass by returning an empty array. That makes the test pass. So that's a first working test, believe it or not. That's how simple it can be getting started. What's the next test going to be? Do I need this code here? I'll just get rid of it for now. So I've got a passing test. I mean, it doesn't feel very satisfying though, does it? To have a function as yet that does nothing. But all we've got to do to move forward is to think of what the next test is going to be. So what would be a good thing to do here? One thing that's going to move it forward is to see if we can lay out a gallery with one item. What's a better name for this? Can lay out a gallery with a single item. Let's go with that. So what does our gallery look like? It's an array with one item. What are we going to put there? Yeah. I'll just copy the code from this test here. If now I'm passing in my gallery. And I'm going to say rows is equal to something that has one row and one item. And that item will be the same as the item that I've got above, basically. I'll just put the item up here. That's going to be something that fits into my gallery. It's going to be a gallery here with one item. I'll just collapse that array into one line here. So our gallery is an array with one item. And we're just going to test that same item comes back, but in the row layout. That makes sense? Now, I do want to test this visually as well, like I said before. So I want to be able to test this visually. How am I going to do that? This is a great little website for getting placeholder images of varying sizes that you can use to, it's perfect for like a photo gallery. So I can get a URL like this. I'm going to plug in a particular resolution. And then I'm just trying to make some realistic test data here. We're going to start using this. We're going to start needing width and height soon. So let's get this in. Go back to our tests. So of course we start with a failing test. And this is the thing that we've got to, it's saying, what we're getting here is an empty array. What we expect is an array of rows with one item in the first row. Now we can sort of hack in some code to get this thing working. So if there is no gallery passed in here, or if there is nothing in the gallery, that's where we want to return our empty array. Otherwise, we need to return something here that will make a test pass. And it's literally, again, we're just taking real simple, real deliberate steps here. Literally, if we just pass in the gallery, cool, we've got two passing tests. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a little quick refactor. I want this input to be called items. So we could be committing this code as we're going forward. We could be committing this code and keeping a record. I'm not going to worry about that because I just want to move a little bit more quickly than that. I actually want to see, at this point, I want to see this visually and see what we have. So we are using the create layout function to create our rows. Looks good. Now I could also be creating various examples here based on what I'm using here in my data. So I could copy this out, this single item, and I could make a gallery out of that. Comment out where I'm importing my gallery data here. And instead, I'll make my gallery data be this one item. And we can see what that actually looks like. Oop. Oh, so I called that thumb, and that's not going to work. It needs to be under URL thumb. This is really just to match the Unsplash data. I don't really want my data format looking like this. So well, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change this. I'm just going to change this to be item.thumb, and later on I'm going to reformat or kind of transform my test data to match that format. And so you can see here, I've got a gallery. I've got my one placeholder item. So I've tested visually at this point that I can have one item work in my gallery, and I've also got a test that proves that one item can work as well. Now let's scale this up to 3 items. I'm going to copy this whole test here. So I'm creating a new test and lay out a gallery with multiple items. Let's say that I've got an array of items, and that one's just going to be the first item. And copy that so that I've got 3 items. Let's give these some different numbers. So I'll just invert that. It works the other way around as well. And we'll say that one's 300 by 50, and we'll just update the width and the height to match. Now this is going to get me a failing test, which is what I wanted. I always want to start with a failing test. Actually, no, that's a little bit more work to do here. At the moment, actually, this would be a passing test if I'm just expecting the items to come through. But that's okay because the same code works, and I can test. If you ever want to test that your test can fail, which is pretty important, you can come into your code here and just comment out the bit that makes it work. If my prediction is correct, this should give me 2 failing tests, thus proving that my tests are capable of failing. If you can't prove that your tests can fail, it's not going to work for you. The next step up really is to be able to wrap items. So I want to say if an item doesn't fit within the gallery width, then I want to wrap it to the next row. This is really scaling our layout algorithm up to the next level. And I'm actually going to need a gallery width pass through as a parameter here. Let's get that passing through. I think I've got that already here. I need to put that there, gallery width. Let's just set it to 600. I think that's what I was setting my prototype to. I do need to pass this through to all of these things. All of these tests that I've already written need to have this gallery width passed through. Let's stick with these 3 items. I'll copy this test again. But what I want to test now, this new test is going to be items wrapped to the next line, to the next row on overflow. So when we overflow the right-hand boundary, basically. So what I want to do is I want to make the width of these images overflow over this 600 pixel barrier that we've got for the gallery width. If I make this be a little bigger, let's make a bigger image in here. Of course, it's not going to fail because I haven't updated my expectations to be what I want them to be. So what I'm expecting now is I want to see 2 rows. So the first row is going to have items 0 and 1 in it. And the remaining row is going to have that last item in it. I'm going to get a failing test. So this is what I wanted at this point. I want to get a failing test because I haven't written the code that's actually going to produce this. So that's what I'm going to do now. It's all part of the TDD process. And this is where we really have to kind of level up. So I'm going to completely get rid of this other else statement here. Because now I've got to do a loop. At this point here, I've got to do a loop over all the items, and trying to plug them into the row. And if they overflow, I've got to put the item on the next line. So it's getting a little bit more complicated now. So let's get the current row. Starting a row with no items. So I'm going to push that current row on the list of rows. I need to know what the current row width is, starting at 0 because there's nothing we're going to do next. So looping over all our items. So this is where the aspect ratio comes into. If you remember from my prototyping, I worked out this is where we want to use compute the aspect ratio for each item in the gallery. This is what prototyping was used for. If I didn't do that prototyping, I may not know to do this right now. So we're going to compute the rescaled width of the item based on our. This is where I do need to bring the target. If I don't bring in this target row height, I can't do this rescaling here. So let's compute the width of the item based on aspect ratio and the target row height. Might as well take a moment now to kind of plug that in here, the row height for each row. And if there's any items being added to the current row so far, let's look at if the computed width would overflow the gallery width. And if it does, we start a new row. Now I'm copying the target row height here per row, because a little bit later on I want to be able to adjust that height to make each row fit nicely up against the right-hand boundary. Push the new row onto the list of rows, and I'm going to reset the row width to 0. So this is the case if we've overflowed and we're starting a new row. Otherwise, the behavior is to add the item to the list of items in the current row. I think so. And then update the current row width with the computed width. And finally, return all the rows. So if this works, it should make all my tests pass. Oh, we've got one failing test. So three passed, one failed. So the problem is now I've added this height. So I'm capturing, I've really jumped a couple of steps ahead here, but sometimes it just makes sense to do that. So what I need to do is I need to pass in this target row height to my create layout, and then I need to kind of add that to my tests. So I'm just going to set that to 200. I'll just copy that for each of my tests, and then I'm going to pass that as a parameter. Create layout function. Hopefully that's good. It shouldn't change this. We're still getting back an empty row here, so that should be successful. On this one here, I'm expecting that height to come back. And also on this row here, I expect the height to come back. And on this one here, I've got 2 rows and 2 heights coming back. With a bit of luck, this will give us a passing test. Not quite. Now, here's a trick for debugging tests. I'm just going to isolate that one particular test. I'm going to do a console log of my expected data as well. So this is a little bit hard to see. I'm going to have to zoom out to see it. If I can compare, so this is wrapping. So we've added the wrapping, and it's wrapping my multiple items. So I've basically what I've done here is I've broken this test, you know what? I've just like it's the target row height. So these widths and heights don't even matter. What matters is when they're scaled up to 200 pixels. So when you scale this up to 200 pixels, and this up to 200 pixels, and this up to 200 pixels, the width is going to increase for all of those things as well. So I think I've got to the bottom of this. You know what? I'm pretty happy just to hard code all this to something that I know is going to work, something that I know is not going to wrap. So let's just do that. I'm just keeping these all up to date as well. Glad I figured that out. Shouldn't need those logging, and hopefully we'll be at all passing tests. This would be a good place to commit, and it's a good place to wrap up today's live stream as well. Let's make sure this works. And then I'm also just going to do a quick visual test as well. I just want to do a quick visual test of the wrapping to make sure that works. So I'm going to copy that test data, comment out that old gallery code that I had there. This will be my gallery now. Now let's check the web page. I'm missing a few things here, so I've got to update my call to create gallery here. I've got to pass in this gallery width, and I should also pass in my target row height of 200. And I'm also going to use the target row height at the moment for each row down here, so that I can vary that if I want to change that and see what the effect is. So you can see here I've got some kind of wrapping. It's really scaled this image up, so it's really overflowed. It's not perfect yet by any stretch of the imagination, but I can see that I've got some wrapping there. It's wrapped this last image here around to the next row. That's what I was after. I was also after passing tests. So I'm doing these live streams to support my book, Rapid Full Stack Development. Please check it out online. The code that I've developed today using test-driven development will be available on the Rapid Full Stack Development GitHub page. In the next session, coming up in 48 hours, I'm going to be continuing test-driven development and hopefully progressing through to completing this custom layout algorithm that I'm creating for the Photosphere photo gallery. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.